Okay, we'll start with this. The girls are all weighed in for tomorrow. Dina Thorslund, Unified Ring Magazine and Lineal Bantamweight champion, will be defending her titles against late replacement Mary Romero, which we've already talked about, how it's not a far cry from the fighter that she was going to fight, Serene Satine. A mid-range to inside pressure fighter, Mary is all those things. So, by all rights, Dina should make it through it. She should make it past Mary Romero tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if she stops her.
What comes after?
Dina Thorslund is having this fight very early in the year. You will notice this is going down in the first quarter of the year, leaving 3.
Plenty of time to schedule other fights. She's one of 3 champions at this weight, just 3.
There's Japan's own IBF champion, Yoshida. There is the United Kingdom's own Nina Hughes, WBA champion. It just so happens that Nina and Dina used to be managed by Let's Go Management. They used to be managed by the same people, but very recently, Nina Hughes gave her team a complete overhaul. She's not with Matchroom anymore, she's with Lou DiBella, and she's
not with Let's Go Management anymore.
Making a fight between Nina and Dina a bit more viable, because when 2 fighters have the same management behind them, that management doesn't want to make a fight between 2 of their own.
Even if they want to fight each other.
An example is how Rick Merrigan manages both Jose Ramirez and Arnold Barboza. Last year, they were ordered to fight more than once. I think they were ordered to fight 2 or 3 times, but the fight didn't materialize. Why?
Likely because Rick didn't want it to. He'd rather his guys go out there and fight other people, not each other.
I think that Dina would like to fight Nina. I think that Nina would like to fight Dina, and it feels like it's a lot more viable because they're not with the same management anymore.
Who's going to pay for it?
Comparatively, Dina Thorslund has more domestic drawing power, more marquee value in her neck of the woods than, say, Nina Hughes does in hers, or Miyo Yoshida has in hers. That Dina draws in Denmark more than they do in Japan or the United Kingdom.
It's how she was able to get then WBC champion of Mexico, Yuli Hangluna, on a plane to Denmark, because Dina can draw.
It's how she was able to land that unification match. Later on this year, I think it's possible that she can land others because she has the time and resources to do it.
Can she win?
Dina is a very special fighter, talented fighter that toggles between not 1, but 2 different base styles. Most of the time you see Dina, she's a boxer-puncher. That's most of the time.
Not every fighter can do this.
It's really only the special fighters, the very, very special fighters, the elite fighters that can do this. How Floyd Mayweather transitioned from being a boxer-puncher to being a pure boxer. How Canelo Alvarez started out as a boxer-puncher, but started adopting the characteristics of a pressure fighter when the situation calls for it, like Terence Crawford. How he can be a pure boxer and a boxer-puncher when the situation calls for it. When the situation calls for it, Dina Thorslund can be either a boxer-puncher or a pressure fighter.
Not every boxer-puncher can do this, can make that kind of an adjustment. The name of Teofimo Lopez almost immediately comes to mind, as does the name of Regis Prograis. These are boxer-punchers
that have limitations. They're not adjustable. They're good at what they're good at.
Counter-punching.
Hanging back and setting up counter shots, then moving in. But if they have to give chase, and they have to come forward, and they have to apply pressure, they're a lot more vulnerable. Whereas Dina
can put the squeeze on her opponent, and she can do it effectively.
I like her chances against Nina Hughes, a mid-range to inside pressure fighter. I like her chances against Miyo Yoshida.
She's a mid-range fighter, too. That's her sweet spot.
Not because they're not good fighters. Both Nina Hughes and Miyo Yoshida are good fighters. They're both good fighters. Miyo's a 2-division champion. She's been a champion at 2 weights, super flyweight and currently at bantamweight. But I think Dina beats them both, not because they're not good fighters, but because Dina is a cut above. And she makes me proud to be from Denmark.
You're not from Denmark.
It's not the point. The point is that Dina's actually a few years younger than both Miyo Yoshida and Nina Hughes. She toggles between 2 base styles, whereas they just have 1.
She's more adaptable than they are, more athletic than they are.
Very aggressive fighters, both Nina Hughes and Miyo Yoshida, but Dina Thorslund has enough firepower that she can actually match and or surpass their aggression, if nothing else, work around it, because she's more athletic than they are. So if push comes to shove, and Dina ends up opposite the ring 1 or both of these champions later on in the year, I think she beats them both. I think she stands a strong chance of becoming this division's undisputed champion so long as they can make the fight.
She's going to win this weekend.
We'll see what happens afterwards. Men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news. I'm sure you've heard by now. David Benavidez's promoter, Samson Lewkowicz, has declared that Al Haymon's PBC have now offered Canelo Alvarez a guaranteed purse of $55 million to fight Benavidez next, who will be moving up to light heavyweight to fight Alexander Gvozdyk instead if Canelo turns it down. Particulars in association with the claim is the $55 million that Samson claims he's offering Canelo, as well as the Mexican rights to the fight.
To the pay-per-view.
And you want to pay attention to that because Canelo Alvarez already has the Mexican rights to the fight. That's not something that Samson Lewkowicz can offer him. You say you offer him $55 million. That $55 million don't exist without Canelo.
Think about it.
David's fans don't want to, but think about it. Really sit down and think about it. How do you say you offer him that amount of money when he's the only one that generates it? You can't.
You don't.
These components, these elements don't exist because of you. These are not elements that you can offer him. This is what he brings to the table, not what you bring.
So how can you offer him what he brings?
In any event, that's what Samson Lewkowicz came out with yesterday.
That's what he said.
So what's the problem? Make the fight then. Make the fight between them.
What's the problem?
The problem is that Eddie Reynoso says that Samson Lewkowicz is lying. He's saying that Samson Lewkowicz is outright lying.
He hits back at Team Benavidez following Canelo criticism.
Trainer and manager of Canelo Alvarez, Eddie Reynoso, has hit back at claims that the undisputed super middleweight champion is avoiding divisional rival David Benavidez. Canelo versus Benavidez has become one of the most wanted fights in the sport due to their respective standings in the 168-pound ranks and natural rivalry. With the pair firmly cemented in their positions as the top two in the division, Benavidez has been vocal in his calls for a fight with Canelo, having held the WBC's mandatory challenger status for the super middleweight title since 2021.
Wait, what?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that David's been mandatory since 2021 because in 2021, Canelo Alvarez satisfied his mandatory in Avni Yildirim. Remember?
David wasn't mandatory in 2021. He wasn't even interim champion in 2021. He doesn't become interim champion until the following year in May of 2022.
It's important to establish that timeline, lest it create more confusion that the author of this article is claiming that David was mandatory challenger as far back as 2021. No, he wasn't. That year, Avni Yildirim was the mandatory challenger. David don't become interim champion until the following year in 2022, and according to the WBC,
they haven't ratified him as mandatory yet. They're not set to do that until March of this year, literally next month.
Benavidez's frustration has forced the WBC's interim champion at 168 to explore other opportunities, with terms agreed to face Alexander Gvozdyk in June. They have made an offer. I have said yes, and now start working towards it, confirmed Gvozdyk. There is not much more that I can tell you. This only started happening yesterday. I've immediately said yes, and that is it so far. Samson Lewkowicz, Benavidez's manager, posted that Canelo's team had turned down an offer and laid out specifics on X, that he subsequently deleted them. And if what he's saying is true, then why would he have deleted them? Speaking to ESPN Mexico, Reynoso fired back at Benavidez and his team that Canelo has actively avoided a fight with his longtime WBC mandatory challenger, and he denied an offer had been made for the fight between the super middleweight rivals. I find it in very bad taste that they say Canelo is afraid of him. Reynoso told ESPN Mexico, I don't know how they dare to classify a fighter as fearful who did not hesitate to face Floyd Mayweather, Miguel Cotto, who faced the fearsome Gennady Golovkin when he had knocked out half the world, who rose to the light heavyweight division risking everything to face Dimitri Bivol. The reality is that none of the big promoters have given me an offer to face Benavidez.
That makes this a bona fide case of he said, she said. That means it's what Samson Lewkowicz is saying versus what Eddie Reynoso is saying. Who do you believe?
Did they really offer Canelo Alvarez $55 million and the rights to the fight in Mexico? Does that make sense to you?
That doesn't make sense to me because Canelo has the rights to all of his fights in Mexico. That's not something that Samson can offer him.
According to Eddie Reynoso, the reality is that none of the big promoters have given me an offer to fight Benavidez.
Boxing insider Rick Glacier questions whether or not David Benavidez ever wanted to fight Canelo Alvarez.
An unusual stance you don't often hear whenever this subject is broached. He says, now you can absolutely forget about Canelo versus Benavidez. Did David Benavidez really even want to fight Canelo? With this move, you have to really question that.
What move?
The move up to 175, the move to face Alexander Gvozdyk for WBC interim status at light heavyweight. What Rick is saying is that in light of this, did David ever really want to fight Canelo? Don't forget that the WBC stated next month they were going to ratify him as Canelo's mandatory challenger, officially install him.
Because they were going to order the fight. We have to trust that the WBC was going to actually order the fight between them?
I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you what Rick Glacier is saying based on how David Benavidez is moving and what the story has been up until this point. That next month, the WBC was set to ratify David Benavidez as Canelo's official mandatory challenger. What you believe is between you and God.
What do you believe? What do you think?
You want to know what I think? And you're here, so I'll assume that you do. What I think is that this is a case of he said, she said, a bona fide case of he said, she said, where you're either taking Samson Lewkowicz at his word or Eddie Reynoso at his word.
Who do you believe?
Well, I can tell you who I don't believe. I don't believe Samson Lewkowicz. I don't believe Samson Lewkowicz or anything that comes out of his mouth, anything he says, because I remember he started off last year saying that they had a signed contract for David Morrell.
What he told YSM Sports Media at the beginning of last year. It's on video. It's right here on YouTube.
We've talked about that here on the channel, how Samson started off last year saying they had a signed contract to fight that guy last year, just so that this year he can admit he's the reason the fight hasn't happened, that he's culpable. He's blocked that fight, and he doesn't want it to happen until they quote-unquote both have belts.
I don't understand.
He lied about the David Morrell fight. He lied about the signed contract. He lied before.
So who says he's not lying again?
If he lied last year about a signed contract to fight David Morrell, why wouldn't he be lying this year about the Canelo offer?
If what he's saying is true, then why did he delete his tweet as soon as Eddie Reynoso responded?
You want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do. I don't believe a word Samson Lewkowicz said. You've admitted to lying before. You could be lying again. I have no reason to take you at your word.
How can I? You're saying you're offering Canelo Alvarez the rights to the fight in Mexico.
That already doesn't make any fucking sense because he already has the rights to his fights in Mexico. That's not something you can offer him. And looking at it, what I think you're doing is you're using the ignorance of the fans, trying to cultivate favor.
Throwing out crazy numbers like 55 million.
If it's Eddie Reynoso's word against Samson's, I'll take Eddie Reynoso's word over Samson's because Samson is a proven liar.
Let's not even do the whole resume versus resume thing, the track record thing. Let's not
rehash the same tired old conversation. It's simple. It's Eddie's word versus Samson's, and I believe Eddie over Samson because Samson's a fucking liar.
Why would Samson feel comfortable enough to lie about something like this?
Because he knows the fans are fucking stupid, and at least some of them are gonna run with it. Some of them are gonna run with whatever he says without thinking about it, though he can't be that comfortable because he did delete the tweet.
Where he claims to have offered Canelo 55 million and the Mexican rights to the fight. Yeah, he deleted that. He deleted that yesterday, though, not before some people screenshotted it and not before it made headlines.
What I think he's doing, he's winding you guys up, and you guys are getting wound up because you let these people wind you up. You already knew that David Benavidez wasn't going to be next. At minimum, you knew that.
And David Benavidez not being next, that doesn't mean that the fight can't happen.
It's supposed to be the situation between them is that if David Benavidez goes up there, beats Alexander Gvozdyk and becomes WBC interim champion, he's willing to come back down for Canelo.
The goal is to become interim champion at 2 weights, but he's willing to come back down and face Canelo in September.
What he's trying to do is become the WBC's mandatory challenger at 2 weights, at 168 and now 175.
So the door's not closed?
You're just getting wound up because Samson Lewkowicz and Team Benavidez want a wine job. They want you to do that. You're letting them.
Simple.
Now, why Sampson specifically, why he'd want to wind people up like this is maybe he's angry. Maybe he's upset because he doesn't want David to go to 175. He wants him to stay at 168.
So why don't he?
Well, look at how long David has been at 168. Look at how long he's been making that weight, and look at the size of the man. That he's in his mid-20s, his body's only getting bigger, that weight is only getting more difficult to make. Perhaps he's outgrown it, or starting to outgrow it. So he wants his next fight to be at a higher weight because he doesn't want to kill himself to get down there.
According to Memo Heredia, David Benavidez's strength and conditioning coach, this idea essentially came from David.
He doesn't want to wait around, and credit to him for that. The way it looks, it doesn't look like David Benavidez wants to kill himself getting down to 168 for a David Morrell or somebody like that. For fighting somebody like that and going through all that trouble, you might as well move up at least for one fight and fight a former champion.
Samson Lewkowicz probably doesn't like it, but Samson Lewkowicz ain't the one killing himself to get down to 168.
So he comes out with all this stuff to make Canelo Alvarez and his team look bad, angry that Canelo's on his time and not the WBC's, that Canelo's on his time and not theirs, that they would like that fight to happen sooner rather than later, but it's up to Canelo, not them. It's up to Canelo, not the WBC, not Team Benavidez, not nobody. He's the captain of the ship.
Samson's pouting.
Samson's angry, that's what it is, so he starts up with the smear campaign.
I don't think he wants David to go up. I don't think he wants him to fight Gvozdyk.
Why would he? You know, he likes his chances against most, if not all, other super middleweights, and what is supposed to be an aging Canelo Alvarez who's naturally smaller, shorter guy, shorter and stumpier.
And even if he doesn't, even if he feels like underneath it all Canelo would beat him, he'd still make more money losing to Canelo Alvarez than rolling the dice at light heavyweight.
Samson wants him to stay put, and he's angry that he isn't. It could be that way. Can this plan actually work? Let's say David goes up there, he fights this guy in June, and he wins. He actually wins, because some people don't think he's going to.
Some people think he's going to get found out up there.
And that's possible. You're big man on campus at super middleweight. You're not so big at light heavyweight, so I see where they're coming from. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that he wins at 175, then he drops back down to 168 as soon as September. For Canelo.
175 in June and 168 in September. You know, I've never liked David's chances against Canelo.
Even before any of this news broke, I've never liked his chances against Canelo based on experience and based on styles and based on David being at this weight for so long, having not fought a puncher.
It's the hardest puncher he's ever fought.
It's the biggest puncher he's ever fought. There's a reason for that. You guys don't want to admit it to yourselves, but there's a reason. Been at 168 for all these years, and he's never fought a bona fide puncher, a real heavy-handed guy like he's supposed to be. I've never liked his chances just based on that Canelo can punch.
He's got the right style for the job. He's more experienced than David.
And if David actually goes up to 175 in June and drops back down to 168 in September, I think Canelo Alvarez knocks him out.
Simple.